Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. Today is April 15th. This is the 14th episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. And as always, we are sponsored by Rig Gaming with the lovely headset that I have on my head. It's been a very quiet week this week, obviously with today being Friday and the Easter weekend sort of globally. A lot of companies have sort of gone a little slower on news this week. In order to give people, a chance to take some time off and have a bit of an extended break. As it's been sort of 4 months since the last one at Christmas, New Year, or 3.5, depending on how you want to count it. So, it's been a pretty quiet week overall. There is some, good news, some interesting news, and we have, some hands-on to talk about as well. So, we're not going to wait too much more to get into it because there are some very, very cool things to talk about. And the first is that QuakeCon 2022 is an online event only. So Bethesda announced during the week that QuakeCon 2022 will be back again this year, bringing the series back once more, but it will not be an in-person event. It will retain its online-only persona that it gained last year, and obviously the year before in 2020. They have already confirmed that it will be back in person next year, next August. So QuakeCon 2023 will be a completely normal event for those that do attend in person. Hopefully they still continue to do things online as well because the event has obviously grown in the last couple of years given that they've pivoted to the online model. We don't know any details about anything that's happening with the event. We just have the statement from the team behind QuakeCon. It just says, like you, we're disappointed not to return to Dallas this year. An event of this size requires months of planning, and in this case, we had to make decisions when there was still too much uncertainty to commit to successfully executing an in-person QuakeCon. The QuakeCon team is already working hard to put together exciting new streaming program, online meetups, giveaways, charity opportunities, and the virtual BYOC. Bring your own computer if you're not sure what that was about, and more, and we'll announce more details in June. So a couple of months away for that. We're committed to returning to our full in-person festival in 2023 and already looking forward to reconnecting with friends, a massive BYOC packed with your latest custom PC creations, our crazy contests, and tons of great new games and hardware for attendees to try out. I can't wait to see you online this August and in person next year. It's a little sad that they're not doing an in-person event this year. Obviously, we saw E3 back in January said they weren't going to do an in-person show this year, which made sense because of the way things were happening then. So I've just noticed so they didn't do the show. E3 said they weren't doing a show back in January because that's when Omicron was really gaining steam. This is before the big drop off of everything. So it is a little sort of not weird that they're not doing it, but Gamescom is in late August in Germany, and they're still committed to doing a completely in-person show again. Returning to that, they're still going to be doing a lot of stuff digitally as well. So so QuakeCon being purely digital is obviously a little weird. It's a little sad. But it is what it is. These events, obviously, as they said in the statement, they do take a lot of preparation. It's not so much as just renting out a venue and asking people if they want to turn up. It's you've got to get the venue. You've got to get the venue not just for the show days, but for, a week leading into it for people to turn up and set up. A couple of days after the show for people to strike their stands. Then there's logistics about the number of people you've got working at the show, right? And if you're going to have, a show like this, let's say you're going to have 4 different hardware makers coming in to show off their new mice and keyboards, they've got to have the right size booth and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot more that goes into these shows than just, asking Company X if they want to, showcase things. So there is obviously a lot that goes into it. And these discussions will have been happening over the past few months when they were, can we do this? Can we not do this? And I think with E3 sort of pulling the pin on theirs, maybe that was sort of the impetus for QuakeCon to say, look, they're not doing it, so let's just focus on doing a purely digital because it's obviously a much smaller scale event for them. They don't have to worry about renting out a venue. But it's one of those things where there's still so much more they can do digitally than they can do in person because the reach is global. Whereas these purely in-person shows, so PAX East is happening in a couple of weeks in Boston. It was, one of the first shows to sort of get cancelled once the pandemic sort of spun up. That was about mid-March 2020. So, they only had a few weeks between sort of the pandemic kicking in and PAX East. So, people are obviously chomping at the bit to go back to in-person shows. But as, QuakeCon is run by Bethesda, which is owned by Microsoft, they're very, very cautious on these things. They don't want to host anything that could potentially cause problems for the greater community. So it is a little sad that they're not doing it in person, but as somebody who doesn't go all the way to Texas for QuakeCon, I'm happy for it to be online only. So I can still enjoy, what they have to offer. And speaking of enjoying things that, we might like, Laced Records has teamed up with Gearbox to release the Tiny Tina's Wonderlands vinyl soundtrack. So occasionally we get game soundtracks on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, Google Music, whatever they call it these days, all the time. Game soundtracks are nothing new. We've had them for years. I've got, the CD of SSX Tricky, from that game back in, it was like 2003. So these soundtracks are nothing new, but there has been a resurgence of late of vinyl. It's a bit of a display piece to say, hey, look, I've got a vinyl record collection. It's also a bit more of a collector's item, I suppose, because they don't make a lot of vinyl anymore. You can go into a JB Hi-Fi and pick up the latest, album from Artist X, on vinyl. But they don't do a lot of those in person purely because a lot of prints of those purely because they are so limited in their appeal. But we've had more and more folks coming in and saying, "Hey, I want vinyl albums." Lace Records has obtained a bit of a following in doing this. So I'll open up that link while we talk about it. So they're doing the same thing. So you can see here on the screen if you're watching the video. There are two versions. One is the standard black vinyl, which is sort of common. It's what sort of most vinyl records are. And then the other is the they call it the Blood Dragon Red and the tiny teal coloring. So the same music, same packaging, just the color of the actual records is a little different. So those things, they're there. They're $35 US a pop each. So if you do want them, it's about $50 Australian per one you order, which is not too bad. I've seen some vinyls for reprints of old vinyls that have come back into, as I said, JB Hi-Fi is big on selling them for like $70. So they are definitely more affordable. And if I just bring up the Laced Records here, they've got the Far Cry 6 one is new. There you go. That's new. That's $50, right? There's Deathloop here for $35 for the twin pack. $80 for the 4-pack. There's a Mega Man set. There's a Tekken set. Death's Door, Gears of War. So there's definitely a lot of options for fans of vinyl records to enjoy, the various things that people are offering these days. And I mean, that itself is going further and further because PlayStation during the week announced 3 new vinyl prints for Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Ghost of Tsushima, and Returnal. So the prints are all the same. 2 of the prints are from one company, one's from a third company. But they all have that same sort of unique look to them. So the Ratchet & Clank one comes with some artwork by artist Shan Jiang. And as you can see here, it comes with a translucent-ish, purple disc and an orange one as well. The Ghost of Tsushima one comes on like this blood red, print, and then the Returnal comes in the vibrant yellow that Returnal is known for. So each of these is also available from the various stores. I'll throw the link for this one in the chat while I think about it. So yeah, if you're fans of vinyl, if you're fans of these games and their soundtracks, these are definitely ways that you can look into maybe getting something a little more unique, because the price of these things, they're not cheap. The Ghost of Tsushima vinyl, it's $27 US, which again is probably around 45 Australian dollars plus whatever the postage happens to be for it. But the end result is that you'll have something that you can't get locally. You can't pop into your local record store and buy them. So if you do want these things, they are very, very special, and obviously limited. The Ratchet and Clank set is currently pre-ordered already. It's out of stock. But it's one of those things where it was out of stock yesterday. I've just loaded up the link now. It's back in stock. So they're only taking these things, taking orders, limited time, until they get enough, and then they'll do the prints. So it is very exciting that they're doing these things. But yeah, it's just cool that we're starting to see more celebration of the things that make the game. For years we've had art books. We'll have art books that are 50 pages, and there'll be little books that can fit inside the game case. And then we've had 300, 400, 500 page art encyclopedias essentially for a game, which celebrates the art. But now we're starting to see more love given to the music of games, which is something that I'm very, very happy about, because I do love good video game soundtrack. With some good news like that, we have to talk a bit about some bad news, and that is related to CD Projekt Red. Specifically, the bad news is that The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S has been delayed again. The game was meant to be released, or the enhanced version of the game was meant to be released late last year for those consoles. They pushed it into quarter 2 of this year. So quarter 2 is April 1st through June 30. To give Saber Interactive, the team who are doing the enhanced version of the game, more time to get everything correct and ready. Unfortunately, they needed more time, so they've delayed the game even further. It's not just that they delayed it though; it's also development has shifted back from Saber Interactive to in-house at CD Projekt Red. Really don't like how Twitter doesn't do that. Just does not do that. It doesn't display the tweet properly. Basically, during the announcement that the game would be delayed until later in the year for the next gen consoles, they confirmed that development is being brought back in-house to CD Projekt Red. This obviously is interesting news, because Saber Interactive they obviously did the Switch port of The Witcher for CD Projekt Red, so they brought that across to there. But the studio also did some development work on some of the DLC for The Witcher 3. So, if we're looking at things, CD Projekt Red developed like 98% of The Witcher 3. Saber Interactive did the final 2% and the Switch port. So they definitely know the game. They definitely know what they're doing. So the fact that development's been brought back in-house could point to a number of things. One, they just wanted to do it internally because they wanted, they needed to give their team something to do. Two, that the development was just being lax, being sluggish. Maybe the developers at Saber weren't hitting the milestones that CD Projekt Red were hoping for. So they brought it back inside to get things back on track. Or maybe the quality of the work wasn't quite what they needed it to be or wanted it to be. And obviously with Cyberpunk 2077 and its less than successful launch, they opted to say, no, hang on, we're going to delay it, we're bringing things in-house, we're going to work on it ourselves in order to make sure that this launches in the best state it can, because they really can't afford a second major in quotes there launch of a game and it not being what people expect from a company like that. It is, as I said, a little sad. Anytime we have a delay, it is sad news, but it's just more interesting that they're bringing the development back internally, because we hadn't had any expectation that was going to be the case. They were very, very happy apparently with Saber picking up the work to do it, but then they've decided now that's not the case, and then backing off them and bringing it all internally. It is also possible that since the deal was struck, Saber Interactive was bought out by the Embracer Group, who also own, Koch Media, THQ, Deep Silver, all those guys, and Gearbox, and even Dark Horse Comics. They bought them out early this year. So it's very possible that they just didn't want to be involved with the company that just keeps buying companies. So maybe that's another thing that they considered and why they brought it in-house. We obviously don't know. We're never actually going to know unless somebody breaks ranks and spills the beans. But they generally won't do that because they're usually pretty lock and key on these sort of things. During the week, though, moving on to some better news, we also got the release of the 19th expansion for No Man's Sky. So No Man's Sky, obviously, a massive game. It had a lot of hype leading into its release back in 2016. The game was obviously, meant to have, full multiplayer. You and your friends could go around in ships, go from planet to planet, explore the galaxy, and do a whole bunch of stuff. When the game did release, there was very little of it available as planned. Because the team at Hello Games is very small. They're not even 20 people full time. And yeah, they didn't have everything they wanted in there. So the game launched. I reviewed it back then. I think I gave it a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10. It had a lot of potential, but it just wasn't quite what they promised. But since then, the team have constantly been working on updates. It's been given the next generation enhancements, so PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and even PC now has better visuals, better everything. If you have PlayStation VR and the game on PS4, PS5, you can play the game fully in VR. So they kept adding to it. They've already done 3 major updates now this year with Outlaws, and the game is still coming to Switch sometime in the winter months, which is obviously June, July, August. And then we even went so far, to have mech suits, so you can have a mech that you can pilot. The last sort of update was called Sentinels, and it overhauled the Sentinels, which were these little robots that lived on planets that if you started doing bad things, they would chase you down and basically kill you. For years, these guys were just sort of little things that would float around, do their own little thing unless you cause problems. The update overhauled that. So they are now a real threat if you cause problems. You could take them out without too much hassle before the update. Now, there were additional types of Sentinels. So they really overhauled that. The reason why I'm saying that is the Outlaws update does the exact same thing, but for the Outlaws, so the pirates. So as you're flying from planet to planet inside of sector, you'll get maybe pinged by a subspace scan. Right, and then if you manage to get to the surface of a planet or into a space station, you can break the scan. Or if you jump out of the sector, you can break the scan. But if you don't, pirates will warp in and start shooting at you, and then it becomes a bit of like a Rogue Squadron style thing where you're flying around trying to shoot, these pirates down. And if you don't, if they blow you up, they steal some of your stuff. The subspace scans were pretty easy to avoid. As long as you weren't, just meandering along, you could pretty much get away without too much hassle. But the Outlaws update changes that. So one of the big things, obviously, is they haven't just updated, the AI behind the pirates. Is there's now sort of a big outlaw economy. So there are space stations that the pirates have actually taken over, that you can now smuggle goods. So you can steal goods from other places, take them from one sector to another, to these outlaw space stations and sell them. So you can start getting credits that way and start being a bit of a bad guy in the grand galactic scale of things. The pirates will also now start raiding planets. So if you're on a planet that has a settlement that's not yours, you may see ships come in and start, blasting it from the sky. They may even start doing it to yours depending on how big a settlement it is. The other big thing that they added this time around is an entire new ship type. So over the years, they haven't really added any ships. This is the first new ship type that's been added since early 2020. And this is obviously, if you're looking at the screenshots here in the video, it's a solar sailor. So it uses these collapsible solar panels to generate power. But the ship's also got another upgrade in that you can now have an additional 2 ships in your inventory. So it's part of your little garage of ships. And with the upgrades to the pirates, if you get pinged and they start shooting at you and you think, I can't actually take them down, you can now, with the press of a button, call in someone from your group, from your squad of AI, to grab one of your ships, fly in and start helping you out in combat. So there's a lot more to it. Let me just pop this trailer on, while we're talking. So these trailers are really cool because they do show the basics. So one of the big things as well is that you can see there's a cape. So, cloth simulation was never in the series before, and this is now a big thing. So you can wear capes and have, curtains essentially in your living spaces, which is very, very cool, and obviously will change up the things, that people have already come to know. As with every update, there's also a new storyline to follow through. What the storyline is here, we don't know. The update only just came out the other day. I haven't had a chance to go in and play it yet. So, but you'll see here the ship, is expanding out to open up those solar sails. Another thing too is that combat is now overhauled, so things in space will actually be better combat-wise. There's also the ability to see better explosions. So every time they do one of these big updates, they will add in new types of they'll fix something. So in the Sentinel update, they did a lot of laser work. And you can see the planetary raids from the pirates. So the last update they added, they did a lot of stuff with lasers to make things better. And you can see here the explosions are more dynamic and grander. Whereas previously, they were very one-dimensional in their impact. So they just keep improving this game over and over and over again, and it's honestly insane just how much they keep adding to this game. And the fact that they'll create the sort of requirements for each of these things, pardon me, to say, hey, we're going to add this, we're going to add that, but then the game creates the detail, and I think that's what's probably more impressive about this is, they're not saying, hey, okay, this is the type of ship, and it has this stats and this many, they build the parameters, and the game, every player that encounters this new type of ship will have something a little different for it. So yeah, it is great to see. Obviously this is the 19th major expansion for it. There's still, they're not slowing down. Obviously it's coming to Switch soon as well, and it's the full game. It's not a cloud version of the game, it's the full experience. So a lot to see and do for No Man's Sky fans, which I am one, and I'm sort of holding off because I'm thinking, I started on PlayStation, then I did it on PC, then I did it on Xbox, and I'm thinking I might have to just start on Switch so I can just keep playing it no matter where I end up. So there you go. Speaking of Switch, later this month, Bugsnax is coming to it, along with Xbox. So Bugsnax is one of those first PlayStation 5 games to release. It was a day one release via PlayStation Plus, so it was actually a big deal for PlayStation 5 owners. It had Spider-Man Miles Morales expansion, Sackboy, the adventure for him, and a few other things as well on day one. But this was, the first sort of big game inside of PlayStation Plus for PlayStation 5 owners. And much like Rocket League and a few others, it did very well, and gained a lot of attention. On April 28th, they are releasing a big update for it called the Isle of Big Snacks, where basically all the bug snacks are much larger, much more dangerous. Let me throw the video on here. And as part of the release of this, the full game, so the expansion, or the free expansion that we're seeing now, and the main game will also be landing on Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, and Switch. Xbox, wasn't a surprise because, most games do go multi-platform at some point. But coming to Switch was a bit of an unknown. The PC version at the moment is currently exclusive to the Epic Games Store, but on April 28th it will also hit Windows Store and Steam. So if you refuse to start up another game store and you're just sticking with your Steam library, this will be available for it as well. Interestingly, too, the full experiences are coming to Xbox Game Pass on release day. So if you have Xbox Game Pass on either console, you'll be able to enjoy this going forward on day one, which is very, very interesting. This is, I think, one of the first games that I can think of where it has released in PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass, on the day that it launched. We sort of say Guardians of the Galaxy launched as a regular game last year and has come since now to Game Pass. Back 4 Blood launched in Game Pass last year, released normally on every other platform. But for PlayStation owners and Xbox owners, if you have the memberships, this game released in both membership programs. So yeah, it's very, very interesting that they've done that. They're talking here in the trailer about the fact that there's some bug snacks now that have hats, and that if you find them, you can start dressing them up inside of things. The expansion itself is going to add about 3 to 4 hours worth of gameplay to the overall experience. So if you have finished the main game, which is about 7 to 8 hours, you're sort of getting essentially double the gameplay with this free expansion. And if you have it, you've got like 12, 14 hours worth of game to enjoy. So as I said, it is coming to all the platforms on the 28th. So for PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC owners via Epic Game Store, the expansion is free on that day. For everyone else, so Switch, Steam, Windows Store, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, the full game and the expansion will be available on that same day. So yeah, it is very, very cool that they're bringing the game to more platforms. Whether or not anyone thinks the game is sort of worth all the attention, that's not what we're here to talk about. I think it looks very, very cool. I get a very, very big Viva Pinata vibe from it. So at the launch of the PlayStation 5, I was reviewing like crazy, so I didn't get around to playing it back then. I think it's in my library, but I've still not played it, so this will probably give me the impetus to jump in and actually give it a go. Speaking of giving things a go, another Fire Emblem Warriors game is coming later this year, and we now know the name of the main character. So randomly during the week, Nintendo dropped on YouTube a new trailer for Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. So it is based on the Three Houses Fire Emblem game that released a couple of years ago. It's a sort of a sequel to that. Somewhat sequel. It's not a straight sequel, but it is connected to it. Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude were the leaders of the Three Houses at the Academy. Those 3 armies are still here, but the new character is named Shez. There's a big thing about they were warrior in heaven. So let me do that as well. They've now sort of come down to do it. The name of the character obviously is not permanent. You can change it. There is a male version and a female version of the same character, much like there was in Three Houses. I don't think what the name was for a second. So so there's a lot of stuff sort of going on story-wise before the sort of gameplay comes into effect. The only thing that sort of worries me about it, so there you can see the female and male versions of Shez. I wouldn't change the name. I like keeping the names to what they say because you can't really make choices in the game, so it makes no sense to me to say, hey, I'm going to call my guy Steve, because it just doesn't make any sense. The only problem that I have with this is, if I were a massive Fire Emblem fan and getting more content with these characters, I personally don't like the Musou genre. Everything that we're seeing here is the same that we got in Samurai Warriors 5 earlier in the year, and Dynasty Warriors 4, and Fire Emblem 1, Hyrule Warriors, Dragon Quest Heroes. So every time we get a Musou game, the gameplay is the same across the board. There's nothing different about them. It's just the setting, right? It's still the same. Mash the buttons, wail on 100,000 enemies as you run across the map. Obviously, the Fire Emblem stuff they did try and do more, but even here you can see here, yeah, I don't know. It's the series, the genre is not for me. There was a period where I had to review 3 of them in a row, and I wasn't a fan of them to begin with, but after 3 in a row, I kind of just went, you know what, this is not fun. So, yeah, I'm not going to keep watching the trailer because they go into a lot more things. Interestingly, we are getting the limited edition version of the game here in Australia. Nintendo did confirm that it is coming here. Obviously, it comes with the game, comes with an art book, the tapestry map of Foderland, which is the region that the game's the 3 houses and 3 hopes is set in, character postcards, and one of the cheapest and nastiest things that I've ever seen in any collection. Every time that pops up, these acrylic figures. These are basically just pieces of plastic that have had prints done to them that you stand up. I see them all the time from things in Japan. They are nasty looking. They're not appealing in any way, shape, or form to me because they're essentially Tarzos that you stand up, and that's it. It's like you would have been better off just doing it as a a special piece of art, printed on a card, right? So, yeah, that's there. The game looks good. Obviously, as a big Warriors game on Switch, there is the potential for it to chug a lot, and I have seen some people claiming that in the footage it chugs. I'm never one to worry about frame rate. If the frame rate is set to be 30 and it runs at 10, sure, that's an issue. But if it's set to run at 30 and it runs at 28, that doesn't bother me so much. It is interesting, again, that they're doing it that way because it is interesting they're doing it that way purely because the Switch isn't obviously a big powerful machine, and having a game that's supposed to have 100,000 enemies on a map, is it really going to push its capacity? There was a game on Switch, I think it was Dynasty Samurai Warriors 4, where I noticed the game would actually load in 2 different versions of the army. One at a big distance where it had very generic model, and then once they sort of hit the radius, the ring of where it renders the better version of everything, and it was a big change, and you could literally if the army was standing still, you could run back and forth and see the models chopping and changing once they got past that radius of the character. So it is interesting that they've done it that way. Back then, we have to wait and see what they do this time. Pivoting away from Fire Emblem and my lack of interest in that particular one, let's talk about lights. I know it's not something we generally talk about because Nano Leaf, we've reviewed a few of their things over the years. They don't release a lot of product. They do release a lot of things. They make a lot, but they tend to just sort of they tweak things, year on year. But the new Nanoleaf lines are very different in that they are bars. So previously, the Nanoleaf designs were squares, then hexagons, then triangles. So they were big, large, flat pieces of plastic, which when they were illuminated look amazing. I've seen people that have had, you can think you got like 10 in a set originally, 9 or 10. And I've seen people that have had like 2 or 3 sets connected together because you can do that, and they go out of their way to make these massive walls of LED panels that when they're synced to music or to extend the light from a screen above it, things like that look amazing, right? They do very, very, very well with this sort of stuff. But when they're not powered on, you just get this giant wall of plastic, which never looks all that appealing. That's what lines is supposed to sort of, do differently. It's not a matter of saying, hey, it's a new shape of light, which it is. The concept behind this one is that when you have it turned off, it can look like a piece of modern art. So what we have down here is, this is, if you're watching the video, this is what it looks like with the lights on. So they've got this sort of, basically a giant W on the wall, with this sort of a white light behind it, but when it's turned off, it looks like that. I've just noticed on their provided picture, one of the caps is missing, which I think is quite hilarious. And for whatever reason, the Switch is on the shelf there. And I just noticed Spider-Man poking his head out the bottom there. So yeah, so these are basically just bar lights, not bar lights like a pub bar, that type, but they're just long straight bars that connect to a hexagonal connector, and then from there you can then make, you know, straight shapes, you can do bends and all that sort of stuff. There is also a flexible connector piece, so if you wanted to have it wrap around a wall, around a corner, you can do that as well, or go from the wall to the roof. You know, that's there so you can keep that line going. Interestingly, they do come by default in the white, but if you want to have them black or pink or a combination of, you can buy the overlays. So you don't actually have to modify the casing on the white ones. You just lay this plastic, this colored paneling over the top of it, which is how you get the pink option up top or the black one up further. They're not cheap. They are priced, I don't think I put the price in here. It's about $300 for the basic set, which is like 9 bars and the power adapter. And then from that, it's $280 at the moment for the, you know, the launch special, which is 9 bars and all the connectors, so you can have like all 9 in a row, or you can make a square or whatever. Normally $350 is what they're saying. The expansion pack, which gives you 3 additional lights and the connectors, is $120 normally. They're doing it at the moment for $96. And then if you want the wall connector, that's $30. And then the coloring panels, they're not selling locally at the moment. But when they do sell them, you know, they shouldn't be too expensive because it's just plastic overlays. They're not, you know, new things to worry about. It is a little expensive for my taste. You know, $300 or $350 for the starter kit, and then, you know, essentially $120 per, you know, extension. And if you wanted, say, you know, the starter kit and 3 sets of extensions, it's actually cheaper to buy 2 starter kits. There is a limit to how many starter kits, how many extensions you can have off one starter kit. So there are some things to worry about there, but yeah, I think it's just very, very interesting that they're finally sort of not embracing modernism, but they're thinking more about, okay, when the lights aren't on, how can we make this look, you know, look good? I think the only other way they could do it is if they started selling, like, you know, when you're on buses or trams or trains and you see the full sort of window prints, you know, from the outside you can't see the holes because they're designed that way, but on the inside you just see the holes, right? So if they did something like that with, like, you know, prints of Marvel comic covers or DC covers, you know, character art from games or whatever, that could get around it. But otherwise, I think this is a very, very good solution for what is essentially a very first world problem. You know, most people don't have these little lights because they are, as I said, quite expensive. And while they do light up, they don't illuminate a full room like a regular sort of room light does. So there are some pros and cons to them, if you're wondering about that. I'll be honest, something that happened this week that I didn't think was ever going to happen, and that's that Kingdom Hearts 4 was announced. So Kingdom Hearts 4 is real, looks very real based on the picture that people are seeing on the screen right now. And technically they call it Kingdom Hearts 4, but it's like Kingdom Hearts 9 at the moment with all the sub-games and spin-offs and mobile games they've done. But what they've done that's different, I'm not going to play the trailer because there will be some music in it that will copyrighted and visuals that may be a bit spoilery. But you can see here Sora is looking very, very different to what we know, you know, him to look like. He in the past has been exceptionally cartoony. You know, if we look at the screenshot here, we're seeing Sora, you know, in what is very Tokyo-ish. You know, it's not a standard sort of. It's not the world from Hercules. It's not the world from Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, even at a push, the only sort of world that would look somewhat similar would be Big Hero 6, and that's at a stretch. So it's very, very different looking for it, and there's a reason for that. Because Sora is now in the quadratum quadratum, however they want to pronounce that. Like Square Enix make up words like, you know, you blink during the day, and some of their words never make sense in English. But this quadratum is what is known as the underworld. Not the underworld, but it's like a parallel world. And things here look a little different. So like we've seen in previous Kingdom Hearts games, when Sora goes to the Little Mermaid world, right? He ends up as a mermaid. And when he goes to the Toy Story world, he ends up as a toy. So this world is obviously has a very unique art style, so he has that art style. In the reveal trailer, Donald and Goofy are walking along, and we get to see them, in their traditional look. And Tetsuya Nomura, the creative director overseeing all of this, in an interview with Famitsu during the week, confirmed that when Sora leaves this location and goes back and meets up with them, he'll go back to his, familiar style. So it is very interesting, that they've done it in this way. It is also very interesting because they said, Kingdom Hearts 3 was the end. And then they announced a mobile game. So, obviously there's, I think, 9 main sort of entries in the series, because the mobile game is technically canon. It's not one of those, gacha things. It's an actual proper game. But yeah, they had a Kingdom Hearts event in Japan on Sunday last week, where they, earlier this week I should say, where they went through all this sort of stuff. It is very interesting. I personally don't like Kingdom Hearts. The combat was just mediocre for me. And as people who know me, they know I'm a massive Disney fan. So, a game that sort of combines all the Disney worlds together sort of, ticked all the boxes for me. But then they laid on 19 levels of Japanese role-playing mumbo-jumbo that didn't need to exist and still doesn't need to exist. And it sort of killed it. So I never got into it from there. But that's sort of, where we're at with that one. That's all the news of the week. So as I said, there wasn't a lot. There was some big stuff. Obviously, Kingdom Hearts is big. QuakeCon is big. But again, because we're leading into the long weekend, a 4-day weekend, sort of globally, it's been pretty quiet across the board. What did happen earlier in the week, though, is I finally got to talk about my time with Nintendo Switch Sports. So Nintendo Australia invited myself and a bunch of other local media to go hands-on with the game. And obviously, they did the network test earlier in the year, where there was Chambara, tennis, and bowling, the 3 original, or the 3 returning sports from Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort, as part of that test. But when Nintendo invited us to go hands-on, we got to play all 6 sports, and got to play them locally rather than online. So instead of 16-player survivor bowling, it was just regular bowling. So I won't read word for word everything that's in here, because I do go into quite a bit of depth on them. But I do want to talk a little bit about the newer sports. So as I said, bowling, tennis, and Chambara are all returning sports. Tennis essentially works the same way as it did previously. Let me just bring it up on the screen. You can see a little bit of footage. You swing, depending on how you swing, if you put spin, backspin, topspin, all that sort of stuff, you can direct the ball. It's very timing based this time. If you're too early, you may hit, too narrow and not hit the ball back on the right angle, stuff like that. The thing that's really stupid about this one is that the game is permanently in 2v2. So even if it's just you and your friend and you want to play against each other, you have to control this same character on the front and back of the court. So as you can see here, there's the two players on the other side of the net. If you're playing on your own against the computer, you'll either have to control the 2 on your side of the court, or just yourself, and the computer will control the other. You can't have 1 player on either side of the net. It's always 2v2. Stupid, but it wouldn't be a Nintendo thing if they didn't do something random for no reason whatsoever. Bowling obviously is returning. It is essentially the same. The way to sort of maneuver around is a little bit. In the previous games, you had to press a button to swap between moving left and right and rotating. Now it's just the same. It's A and X, I think it is, to rotate left and right. and then that's pretty much it. And then the other one you just move left and right. Bowling is a little different in that you now have to hold down the button continuously to sort of begin your approach and then bowl. If you remember in the Wii version and Wii Sports Resort and even Wii Sports Club on the Wii U, you would hold the B button down on the Wii remote, and then once you brought your arm through to do it, you would let go of B to say I'm letting go of the ball, and it would go through. This one, that doesn't exist. You have to hold it down the whole time. I don't get the change. It doesn't make sense to me. Letting go made more sense because you're letting go of the ball, but that's what they've done there. Chambara is the weakest sport because I think it is annoyingly basic, and if they had just pulled from the first Wii Sports and they said, hey, we need 3 sports, you know, I wouldn't have put boxing in, but this is what they've done. They've taken the boxing of Wii Sports Resort and they've put it in. So Wii Sports Resort had archery, had table tennis, had wave race essentially, had a pilot wing style game. You know, they had a lot in there, and for whatever reason they went with Chambara. It is a stupid, pointless game. It's not entertaining to play for me because it is just very basic. You attack by swinging, you guard by holding down ZR, and then holding the sword in the same direction your opponent is going to swing from. If you don't do it, you'll get hit. You get hit, you get knocked back. Get hit enough, you'll get knocked off the edge. It's pretty basic stuff. The new sports, though, are where things got really interesting. So volleyball is the one that we've seen the most of because during the direct presentation, Koizumi-san and Takahashi-san did play on stream. This one is very based on timing. So if you're serving, you just throw your hand up to lift the ball and then bring it down to serve. If you miss the timing, you may not hit at the right height, and you may end up hitting into the net. Right? If the ball does go over and you're on the receiving end of the serve, you have to return the ball. Then somebody sets the ball, and then you spike the ball, which they just did in the video. What is very different about it is, if you watch here, you'll see it goes from green to yellow to purple. So what is interesting is the timing. If you return the ball correctly to get it up to the net to play it, all right, and you do the timing right, the ball will go green, right, because you timed the return correctly. When you, if somebody sets the ball, which is getting it up in the air for someone to spike it down, and you do the timing right, the ball outline changes to yellow to indicate that it was a perfect set, right? If you don't do it, if you mistime it or something, it'll go a slightly different color, depending on how bad you got. And then if you do a perfect spike, you'll see it went purple to indicate a power shot, right? Which makes it very hard to block. Not impossible, but hard. So that's sort of the big thing with volleyball. It's all about timing and keeping that rhythm going. So if you are playing with somebody, which is what this is set up as, it's a 2v2 here, 2 local players. When you're set up that way, you need to keep the momentum going. You need to keep, talking to each other to say, I'm setting it, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, because you want to keep that rhythm going, right? You can obviously still spike the ball if the ball hasn't been set correctly, but you may hit the top of the net, right? If you don't spike correctly, if you spike too late or you jump too early to try and spike it, you may end up missing the net or hitting it into the net. And same thing with blocking. When you're standing there waiting for the ball to come back, you see the guy with the grey hair at the net in the green top. He jumps. Right? He jumped just a little bit too early, right? So he ended up coming down before the ball was clearing the net. So if you jump too early to block, your character comes down, and if the ball is then coming to be spiked, you have to wait a second before you can jump again, so you're going to clearly miss the block chance. So yeah, it is interesting. I don't know how much depth is going to be to it. I think it's the best of first to 5 in all the matches. So it could be cool. It could be not. Badminton is essentially just faster and smaller tennis, is the quickest way I can describe it. So if you're somebody who's played tennis or played badminton, they're not mutually identical, right? They're not the same game, just with a different object. Tennis is obviously played on a much larger court. The ball moves a lot faster. There's a lot more running to and fro. Badminton is quite the opposite of that. It is a slower paced game, but because of the weight of everything, the shuttlecock can move quite slow at times and also quite fast. So one of the big things with this one, again, it's very much like tennis, and you've got to swing correctly and at the right time to do things. But you can see here just in a moment, the game has a thing called a drop shot. So if you hold down ZR, if you're right-handed, or ZL if you're left-handed, and then do the thing, you'll see the character does this thing called a drop shot, and you'll see these little dots behind the trail to indicate a successful drop shot. What that does is it gets the shuttlecock going up and bringing it down just over the net, right? So it's enough to clear the net, but not to send it towards the back of the court, which then causes the opposing player to have to run in and try and catch it, before it just hits the ground. Otherwise, it's your point. It is very, very difficult to do a proper drop shot in a proper competitive match, because an athlete who plays this game competitively will know how to look for that. In the game here, you see when the drop shot hits, because they managed to save it at the expense of them going to the ground, the returning shot had a purple trail, which means that it is set up to be a power shot on the return back. What this means is that, as you can see, the character in orange is on the ground. If your character gets up quick enough before the drop shot before the power shot is hit, you have a chance to get and to hit it back. But if you do, you're essentially half on the other side of the court, stumbling around while the shuttlecock comes back again hard. So, if a successful drop shot can, change up how everything plays out, because there's so many little, timing things for it. When I was playing with the rep from Nintendo Australia, we ended up getting a rally going, which is just back and forth for like a good minute. And it was honestly just very, very, very fun. So out of the three new sports, this was my favorite. The other sport that we played obviously was soccer. If you're looking at the footage here and you're seeing a giant ball and thinking this looks a lot like Rocket League, that's because it plays a lot like Rocket League. So one of the big things control-wise is that this is the only game in the collection that requires both Joy-Con, both the left and right Joy-Con. I suppose technically if you had two left hands or two right hands, you could use a left, both two rights or two lefts. I don't know that anyone actually does need that, but it's the only game. So Chambara does allow you to have two swords, two very thin swords, if you elect, but you can also just do it with one. Tennis, bowling, badminton, and volleyball are all one controller only, but soccer is the only one that does require two Joy-Con. So if you only have two Joy-Con and you want to play this with a friend, you can't use a Pro Controller. You'll have to go out and buy another set of Joy-Con. You use the left stick to do movement with the stick. Left Joy-Con, use the stick to do movement. And if you hold down the L button, you'll break out your stamina to run faster, like burst of speed across the pitch. Kicking is done with the motion of the right. So if you flick the Joy-Con up, you'll kick the ball higher. If you flick it down, you'll kick along the ground. Swing to the left, swing to the right, you'll kick to the left and the right. You can also press B to jump. So if the ball is coming up high, you can press B, jump up in the air, and then flick the Joy-Con up to kick it up higher, and try and lob the ball back to whatever end of the pitch you're looking at. The right stick controls the camera, so the camera is generally locked on the ball, but you can elect to move it manually as well. And you can even press A to say, hey, I'm here, I'm open, kick the ball to me to get your teammate ready. The little bit of footage here ends with the character doing what they call a flying header. There you go. Where if you flick both Joy-Con down at once, your character will dive through the air, much like a Luigi special from Smash Brothers. To try and get the ball going in the direction they want by literally headbutting it. You can jump into the air and do that. It is a big thing. So In the game that I played with the Nintendo rep, we were on the one team against the AI. The Nintendo rep got the first goal, the AI got the second goal, and then we ran out of time. I think the round was 3 minutes. So what happened was the goals actually got wider. So you can see here, there's all this extra stuff on the side. They got super wide in our extra time to give us, a much wider goal to kick into, to make it a bit more of a basically to end the game sooner. And I managed to get the winning goal by trying for a header and missing completely, and then actually kicking it in. So I'll be honest, I had a great time with the game. It's not going to be one that you're going to put a lot of hours into solo, because unless you're going to play, online against people, playing it in your own place is not going to be something you're going to do, purely because there isn't a lot going on with it for local. Obviously, we didn't get to test out any of the online. I didn't get to look into the customization of the sports mates, which is what the new looking Mii characters are. You can use your Miis as a sports mate, but they look really creepy, so I wouldn't do that. The sports mates, though, so as you play in the various sports and various modes, you'll earn points. Points will be used to unlock new items, so new jackets, shorts, shoes, hairstyles, colors, all those sort of things. The more you play, the more points you earn, and every week the store will sort of generate new items to spend the points on. So you play it for a couple of weeks, you get a good bank of points. You may find that you want a new jacket because the one you've got is still a default one, but everything in the store is not right, so you wait till the refresh, and then you might find one that works for you. Obviously there's 2 updates that we know are coming. The first is that it will add the ability to use the leg strap in the actual main game of soccer. I did get to do the goal scoring mode with that strap. It is honestly just timing. You've just got to kick correctly. You don't need to do like a big football boot. You don't need to try for that. You can just do a little motion. As long as the Joy-Con detects that you're lifting your leg, it'll register. And once you get the timing down, if you're too early, you may hit the ball and it'll go off too far to the left. Too late, you may send it back to the direction it came from. So you've got to get the timing right. The first update allows you to use that functionality in the main game, so you'll be able to kick the ball as if you're actually playing. Obviously, make sure you have enough room if you're going to do that one, because you don't want to be kicking over your coffee table or putting your foot through the crystal cabinet next to the TV or whatever. The second update we know is adding golf to the game. Obviously, we don't know how many courses or how many different types there are. The only sort of game that I saw that had any sort of information about the what do you call it? The modes, sorry, was tennis. So tennis was 1 game, 3 games, or 5 games. We just played the 1 game for this preview, obviously, because conscious of time. I'm very concerned that there's not going to be any options, and this is one of the things that killed Mario and Sonic at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics for me. It's great to have the sports, right? So bowling, obviously, there was a big change in bowling. In Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort and even Wii Sports Club, bowling was in order. So if you had 4 players, you had to pass the remote, the Wii remote from one player to one, from player 1 to player 2 to player 3 to player 4 back to player 1. Now you can play sequentially, so you can all play at the same time. Simultaneously. So you can all play at the same time. So you can all have all 4 people lined up, ready to bowl on their portion of the screen. Very basic stuff, essentially, but it does just keep everything moving faster. We do know bowling will have the survival bowling for online, and it'll have the trials locally, so you can try and knock down 1 pin here by dodging 3 barriers and all that sort of stuff. But the thing that I didn't see was custom options, right? So as I said, tennis is locked to two players each side of the court. I don't want that. I don't want to have to control 2 players, and I don't want the AI controlling another character. I saw it in the online test. There was 2 rounds where I was playing tennis, and there were two players on the other team, so they each had their own little person to control, their own sportsmate, and I had two sportsmates, two versions of me on the court. So I get why they've done that. More people can play at once, right? But that's not fun. That's forcing people into an option is not fun. I'd also love to be able to see, in soccer, the timer. We didn't touch the timer, right? It set itself to 3 minutes. I'd love to be able to set a 15-minute, quarter, like 2 15-minute halves to play a game of soccer. We didn't see any of that. Obviously, this was not the final build of the game, but given we're less than a month out from release, I wouldn't expect it to be anything majorly different. But yeah, there didn't appear to be any options for what I can or can't do with game modes themselves. Like, if I'm playing badminton, I want to play to 15, first person to 15 points, not 5 points, right? If I'm playing volleyball, I want to be able to say, hey, no, it's the first to 21, which is regular volleyball. Right? I don't want to be the first to 5. So I really, really, really hope that there are options like that, and even if they come in the first or second updates, that they give me more control. Because as I said, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games had the same problem, where they were, it's like, oh, here's, you can play all these games without going through things. So cool. So, you went to the skateboard park and you had a minute and a half, 2 minutes every time. That was it. You couldn't just go there and free skate, right? When you were playing, track and field, you couldn't just, say, I'm going to do a 1500, right? You could only do the 100 every time, or the 400 every time, depending on the mode, right? So there was no way for me to say, hey, I love this sport. I want to do more of it. Let me set my time limit up. Let me change my point, goal, right? There was none of that. And that's what this appears to be going for as well, is it's saying, no, these are the sports, these are the options you have. You have to do with what we have to make do with what we give you. And I just don't think that's fun or entertaining in any way, shape or form. It may be for other people, because of what they're offering, but for me personally, I want to be able to customize my game more. So one of the things that I hate FIFA and NBA and all those games because they're not appealing to me. I'm not a sports guy, but I love being able to the range of customizations in them. So I love being able to jump in and say, hey, I want to have 2 5-minute rounds in FIFA, so I can just get in and play a game every now and again, right? Or if I want it as background noise, I can set it to say, no, give me full realistic length matches, and the AI can play, and I can just have it off to the side like it's a real game that I'm watching. So there's a lot more that Nintendo should do with this, and I get why they're keeping it simple, but I'd love for there to be a little bit more in terms of offerings for players who want a bit more. So yeah. As I said, like the full hands-on is on the site, and then earlier today we did put up the preview for our hands-on with the Elder Scrolls Online High Isle expansion, which comes with the Tales of Tribute card game. That's a new experience in there, so if you want to level up and you're sick and tired of running into 17 enemies in a row of the same bears or wolves or the forest spirits, I seriously can't remember what they're called right now, or generic Bandit 7, A or whatever. So Tales of Tribute is a card game that will let you play through either PvP against other players in the game, or PvE, so you can play storylines. As you play through that and level up, you earn gold, earn recipes, customization options, emotes, and a bunch of other things as well. It sort of takes. It's like, if you look at it, you can see a little bit of like Hearthstone in some of the elements, but there's a lot more going on. So if you were thinking it's just going to be Elder Scrolls Legends, which obviously Bethesda were making for a while, and then they cancelled it. It was supposed to come to Switch, it never did because they cancelled the game before it released. If you think it's just that embedded inside Elder Scrolls Online, it's not. It's something completely different. There's a full write-up on the site for that as well. In terms of what's coming out next week, there's a lot in Japan. There's literally only sort of one major release on any of the platforms next week, and that's Star Wars The Force Unleashed for Switch, which is a port of the Wii version that Chrome Studios here in Australia developed. I'm playing through that now for review. I'm not going to talk about anything further than that because of, you know, embargo agreements. But that's really the only big game next week. As I said, it is coming back off Easter, so some companies will let their folks take off this week, so they can have this week into Easter. Some say take the other half off, so you can go from Easter in through a long weekend. So there's still, you know, a lot of time off for people. But that's it. That's all we've got time to talk about this week. As I said, you know, the show is live every Friday at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, or 7 p.m. Sydney time, if you will. We'll be back on Tuesday for more of our James Bond series, where we're on the final mission of James Bond Everything or Nothing. We played through like 4 times in that level, and it's so many enemies that just keep spawning. So yeah, we will be on that to play through it, and then we'll be on to GoldenEye Rogue Agent, which is the one they went to after that. They went back to the first-person shooter. It looks very cool. I remember playing it back when it first released. It is the only GameCube game from EA in the Bond series that did release on 2 discs, so it is quite a bit bigger than the rest. But yeah, so we're back on Tuesday for that. We're back next Friday for another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. If you did watch live, I hope you enjoyed it. Otherwise, the video will be on YouTube to watch later. Until then, we'll catch you next time we're online. So until we're back online, happy gaming.